Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. And I got a little treat for you today. So, y'all have been watching my Instagram reels on short-term rental, and I'm going to send a shout out to Kelsey Leka. She's my social media manager. And ever since I put her on the task of getting me more views, she's done a great job. So, if you're looking for a social media strategist, I'm going to link her contact info down below. And full disclosure, she is my daughter. So, but she does a fabulous social media job. So shout out to Kelsey. And here is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about short-term rental checklists. So, at the time of this recording, short-term rentals are still busting it out. You can still make money. I did some videos on, wealth and wealth building, and I didn't include short-term rentals, but I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to talk about fast cash in short-term rentals and then long-term. So I got two things I want to cover today. But before I get going, make sure you hit that subscribe button and follow a gal. It really helps me. And number two, I just want to let you know that I'm going to have a checklist, short-term, launch your short-term rental checklist down below for free. Just click on it, get yours today. So I'm going to kind of talk about the highlights of why I did a short-term rental checklist. So I also got certified recently to teach the short-term rental courses for real estate agents, where they can get continuing education courses, and that's through the Texas Association of Realtors. So I'm really excited about that. And so look for me to be presenting a lot about short-term rentals this year. So launching a short-term rental, there's so many things to think about and talk about and cross off and exciting, because I really like short-term rentals. I think they're a lot of fun. It's fun to have a property where people come and they're like relaxing and they're spending time with their family. And and you're able to kind of take your decorating style, if you have a creative one, and put it into your property to make it stand out. So let's get into it. So number one, market research is, if you haven't bought your short-term rental, make sure you do your market research, because it's always changing, where you can do a short-term rental, where you can't do a short-term rental. And so you want to make sure that wherever you decide to purchase, that you've not only gone on the city's website or county's website and, do a short-term rental, make a phone call. You don't have to say, hey, I'm buying the property at 123 Main Street, but, do your due diligence, because the last thing I want to happen for you is that you bought that property and then you find out after you've closed that you can't do short-term rentals. So that's sad. And it happens. I've seen Facebook posts about it. So you want to check the county, the city, is there a permit process? And then the other thing that people forget is to check the deed restrictions. Or HOA restrictions. So when you're purchasing a property and they have an HOA, make sure you get the HOA docs and you go through them. And they can be really big and boring, but you'll want to do that due diligence, and don't rely on your real estate agent. Bless their hearts. They're not going to have time to read through that. Their job is to, find you a property. And yes, they should probably know, try to find out, but you just want to make sure, because I have been involved where I didn't personally purchase or help the person buy the property, but I was called in after the fact to see if I could help get this going. And it was just unfortunate for the buyer that they bought a property that there was not only no short-term rentals, no long-term rentals. So you want to try and avoid that. So, and probably the top question I get asked is, where should I buy a short-term rental? And, you can do a lot of Googles, what cities are the best and everything. But here's what I say. Make sure it's a place that you would want to go to, because you're going to be having to visit it from time to time, right? So, is it a place that you want a vacation? Do you like the mountains? Do you like to go skiing? Are you a water person, lake, ocean? Do you need a beach? Do you need activities? So I always say, start with, if you don't know where at all, then start with, where you would want to go on vacation, and then start doing your market research and your due diligence. And then you want to, after you've purchased the property, then you're going to start looking at the setup of the property. Like how many guests are you going to sleep? How many beds do you need? What kind of beds do you need? So, you're going to kind of go through all of that, and know what, just how you're going to furnish this house, because then that's going to tell you how much it's going to cost, right? Because there's a cost associated with putting together a very nice short-term rental. And then some of the things that you need to think about is how you're going to prepare your property. Now, I'm talking about safety issues. I'm talking about, how guests are going to access the property. What are you going to do in an emergency? Do you have the right insurance? So all of these, you need to have a checklist for it. And that's why I have this for you. So I'm looking down to remind myself. So your property description, so most of the time, if you're new, you're going to start out and you're going to put your property on Airbnb, right? Because that's just the biggest platform. There's also VRBO. There's booking.com. There's like 100 different websites. You can also create your own website for your property, but how are you going to drive traffic to that, right? So most people have to start off on Airbnb just because that's where most of them are. And how are you going to stand out? What are your pictures going to look like? Who is going to do the photography? Are you going to have drone shots? What are you going to do to make your property stand out among the millions of properties out there, right? And then, you have to kind of figure out what you're going to charge and what are you going to pay for cleaning and who is going to do the cleaning. So you can see there's a lot of things that go into having a short-term rental. And a lot of times what I do is I tell people, if they haven't purchased one, here, get this checklist, because I want you to know, this is not just about buying a property, throwing some beds in it, putting some nice pillows and sheets in there, throwing it up on Airbnb and woo, you're going to make money. That is not how it works. In the beginning, when you first go on Airbnb, they're going to give you a little boost, the first maybe 10 to 14 days so that you'll be at the top. But then after that, you got to maintain that. So, and how are you going to handle guests, right? I did do a video on if you get a bad review, I got a bad review. I'll just give you the lady, the family that was staying there. This is a lake place. We have bugs in my listing. I talk about we have bugs and we have, pest control, but we have bugs. I mean, it's a lake house. And so she complained in a review, like this property had always gotten 5 stars, which is the best. 5 stars, the best. And she gave me a 2. And I'm like, what? I never heard from her or anything. Well, she was complaining about all the bugs that were outside. They weren't even in the property. So I go through the story a little bit better on the YouTube channel. I think it's called how to remove a bad review. So if you haven't, checked it out, go over to YouTube and find that. I'm under Nancy Wallace Labs. Okay. So, just the check-in, check-out process. How are you going to optimize your listing? So as I said, it's pretty crowded on those platforms, right? So what are you going to do to stand out? One of the things that I recommend is checking out other Airbnbs. Now, you could go and stay in an Airbnb in the location, or you can get on different sites that are out there, and you can actually, one of the things I do as a guest, I go on to Airbnb, and there's a way to find out kind of the location without actually knowing the location. And I zoom in and I find properties that are around my area, so then I can kind of check out what kind of amenities that they're having. So, you need to find out who your competition is and, what can you do to, get people, because lowering your price is not the answer, right? The lower the price, the more chances of having bad guests. So you don't want to just lower your price. It's all about the guest experience. There's some must-have features that you can use to optimize your short-term rental. So, download the checklist and I'll give you some of those tips. The guest experience, a lot of people don't want you to meet them. I'm sorry, they just don't. Now, if you're in a shared situation, yeah, okay. When I travel, I don't really care to meet the host. I mean, I have a couple times. It's okay. It's kind of awkward because I'm there on vacation. I'm there to relax. If there was something about the house, like one time we stayed in like an all smart house, and I needed to know how to operate things, and then what happens if the electricity goes out. But generally, I have found that I don't meet my guests. I give them check-in instructions. I have keyless entry, and then I have a backup in case something happens and that keyless entry fails. So, I just want to make my guests feel comfortable without invading their space. Okay. So this is their home for a few days. And I want to enhance the guest satisfaction as much as possible. Um, so, some of the little things that you can do is just have enough toilet paper. Okay. I think I'm tired of seeing people where they're only leaving out like 2 rolls of toilet paper for a house of 10. So, yes, when we had the toilet paper shortage, okay, I can see where you might want to not put as much out, but, because if they're not using toilet paper, what do they use it? Right. So, and I have septic systems, so I'm pretty particular about what goes down that septic system. And then just overall, how are you going to maintain the property? What kinds of things are you going to need to maintain? How are you going to schedule it? Who's going to be responsible for it? Here in Texas, we have to have kind of we have freeze warnings that we don't know about until maybe like 24, 48 hours ahead of time. And if I don't live close to my short-term rental, then, who's going to get the water shut off? Because a few years ago, we had a huge freeze that kind of happened, and a pipe broke in the house and, flooded, and, it was a horrible story. So now that's one of our maintenance checklists, who's going to be responsible? When does that need to be done? And how am I going to communicate it? Because what happened was I did communicate it to a plumbing company that had used and actually, spent quite a bit of money with. And I called them and asked them if they would go by and shut off the water. They assured me they did. I would. And so I didn't think about it anymore. Well, guess what? They got busy and they forgot. So, so I want to make sure now that I have someone who's going to do that it's reliable. I actually pay for a service now. So because that was a huge, expensive learning thing for Nancy. And then I talked about the check-in, check-out procedures, and you'll want to kind of do some research about cleaning fees in your area. So Airbnb recently said, oh, hey, don't charge cleaning fees. Well, in the area that I live in, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth area, cleaners are not cheap. And, they'll to go in and clean a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, they may charge anywhere from $150 to $250, depending on what you're doing. So unless your nightly rate is covering the cost of that, there's all kinds of talk about, well, will guests not come if I have a cleaning fee? Or if I have a cleaning fee, does that mean I can't tell them to take out the garbage? So you'll want to kind of check into how people are handling cleaning fees in your area. So much more to talk about because it's short-term rentals. It's exciting. Really quick, I talked about fast money. So at the beginning of the video. So here's what I want to say about fast money rentals. So if you are somebody who's a photographer, get a hold of a short-term rental. I have found it's kind of challenging to get a photographer that knows how to do nice pictures for the Airbnb and VRBO platforms. It's not just regular photography. It's kind of, a more not enhanced, but there's just a certain art to it. Number 2, you could become a co-host. You don't even have to own the property. You could just co-host with other people, get some, this kind of like property management, but it's called co-hosting. You could start your own cleaning company because if you're good and you have good cleaners, you'll make some money having a cleaning company for short-term rentals because there's just not, and in my experience, that is one thing that owners really struggle with is having good cleaning people. You want to make sure they clean that property, right? Because you only get one chance to make a good impression. And the number one complaint of guests is what? Yes, that's right. Cleaning. So you want to make sure you get that taken care of. So many more nuances. Long-term money obviously is the appreciation of the property if you bought it right. The other thing to consider when you're buying a short-term rental is if the short-term rental market should just crash in your area, can you make this a long-term rental or what's called a midterm rental? A midterm rental is where you might rent it for 30, 60, 90 days, that kind of thing. So it's not considered short-term, it's midterm. Do you have the traffic where you could, if you couldn't do short-term rental, do you have the traffic in your area? So just think about all those things. Again, click below for the short-term rental checklist. I hope you found this helpful. And like I said, give a gal a follow, a subscribe, really helps me out. You guys have a great day and I'll see you soon.